Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 4th Annual Youth Climate Summit for the BUEI. I'm one of your co-hosts, William Campbell.
I'm your other host this year, Leah Jeremy.
We're very happy you guys are all joining us today because we're going to be going through 3 days of interactive programming in which you'll be hearing from and engaging with international youth activists, subject matter experts, and even local alumni from previous youth climate summits.
And before we continue, I would just like to extend a huge thank you to all of the partners that have been able to make YCS available for people all around the island.
We'll be discussing matters related to climate change across 3 themes today, and we will discuss what these 3 themes are in greater detail throughout the summit, and those 3 themes will be conservation, sustainability, and climate justice. And we will want you to think about throughout the summit, developing your own projects related to these 3 themes, and to prepare to select a track, one of those 3 themes, on the 3rd day. But please remember, if you've already registered as an alumni from the summit, we will ask you to select that track instead, and there will be a session for you on site. So just before we get started, we're going to ask everybody, please, to have a look at the Zoom chat and to please ensure that you've renamed yourselves according to the instructions in the chat. That would be just your first initial, your last name, and your school. So please take a moment to ensure that you've renamed yourselves now. Throughout the summit, we're going to be asking you also to participate in Menti polls. These Menti polls are intended to help you engage with the subject material and to respond as well, so we know what you think about them. Please enter the code that you will see in the slide here, and please keep in mind that we will be using Menti throughout these sessions, so be sure to keep that tab with the Mentimeter tab up and ready to go throughout the summit. We're now going to ask you to enter your responses to the first of these Menti questions, and please answer these 4 questions at your own pace. The first question will be, as we start this summit, how concerned are you about climate issues? The second, how confident are you that you can make a positive difference with climate issues? The third, which classes in school have addressed climate issues? And the fourth, we'll ask you to share a passion and what's something that you could talk about for hours. So please go ahead and log your responses to those Menti questions now. Okay, we can see that some people are somewhat concerned, very concerned. Good to see that no one is not concerned at all just now. Lots of folks seem to be at least somewhat concerned. Thanks for those responses, guys. Keep it coming. No, we have at least one who's not concerned at all, but most of you appear to be somewhat concerned. We're hoping to engage you a little bit further to discuss what climate change is and what it means. And again, maybe change your mind about how concerned and how active we should be about addressing climate issues. We can see at least 7 of you are very concerned about climate. Okay, so which classes in school have addressed climate issues? So we can see that science has addressed them, social studies. There's been a little bit of talk about them in art too, in health. That's really interesting because a lot of these issues are related to climate in some way. And so we want to know from you guys how we can relate these issues to climate issues too, and what impact climate change might have on these issues. It's interesting to see that there's been no response in the music column too. How confident are you that you can make a positive difference with climate issues? We can see that most of you appear to be somewhat confident, and we think that's good, but we want you to get a little bit more confident with making a difference in climate issues. It's something that all of us can do, and there's something as well that all of us can engage with a little bit further with climate. Some of you are in fact very confident, and some of you not confident at all. And for those of you who are very confident, that's great. And for those of you who aren't confident at all, that's okay as well, because we're going to work on that, because we all can make a positive difference on climate issues. So thanks so much for all these responses too to the word cloud. How about your passions too? Football appears to be up there. Pollution, yeah. Healthy meals, yeah. Cricket and bikes, Politics, fishing, reading, pollution, dance, mm-hmm. Keep those coming, guys. Those are great responses. Most people seem to be very passionate about music and dance, and that's great too, because that's something as well that we can engage with climate action. Animals, yeah. Food and social media, Learning to be a vet, that's very important too. Overfishing, that's very interesting too. Overfishing, perhaps, as well, is a climate impact. Climate solutions too, and climate issues too. Psychology, very interesting too. That is something that we could talk about for hours, and something too we can relate back to climate issues too. Okay, so remember, guys, please ensure that you keep that Menti tab open and make sure that you have that ready, because we're going to be continuing to ask you to fill in these Menti responses so that we can hear from you. But before we pass along to further Menti questions, we're now going to take time to hear from our first youth activist for this summit. So please join me in welcoming Pahonu Coleman. Hi, Pahonu, and thanks so much for joining us. Pahonu's going to be presenting for 6 minutes, and we're going to have a question and answer session with Pahonu just afterwards. So make sure you please put any questions that you might have for Pahonu in the chat, and we'll be sure to get to them right after our second youth activist.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. It's currently 5 a.m. in the morning here in Hawaii. I come here to share about my work in environmental projects and some of them that I'm a part of. I'll also be sharing about a recent climate lawsuit where I served as a plaintiff and how my deep connection to place grounded and help inform myself in the long litigation process. And I've titled it this presentation, Stewarding the Future, My Journey in Conservation and Climate Justice. I'd like to start off with sharing some information about myself. I'm 19 years old and recently graduated from high school. I come from a small community on the island of Oahu, Hawaii, which is located on the coast. I enjoy doing things like sailing, and I've been able to go on long distance voyages where I don't see oceans for days. I don't see land for days at a time. And we use celestial navigation, which is where we only use stars to tell us where to go and where we are. I also speak 3 languages, and of course, I also love music and being in nature. I'd like to now share about 2 community projects that I've been a part of since the founding. Pahona Restoration is a natural resource and conservation project that I helped found back in 2017. We restore once prominent seaweed and other resources that no longer is at a healthful state. We also restore a historical fish pond that was built approximately 500 years ago and was able to sustain our community with food, being able to be wholly independent from imports and overall addressing food security, which is a huge topic here in Hawaii right now. Malama Aquaponics is also a project that I've been a part of, which is a sustainable food production project that looks into bringing families into a accelerated program where they're able to learn how to build aquaponic systems and overall provide for their community and for their family. Now I'd like to speak about Hawaii's climate lawsuit, Nawahine versus Hawaii Department of Transportation. Nawahine is a lawsuit where 13 young people sued our government on behalf of all young people in Hawaii. We seek to have our rights to a life-sustaining climate be recognized by our state. We did so by targeting our transportation system, the Department of Transportation here in Hawaii. All of the 13 young plaintiffs, me included, have either experienced physical or other harms to them from the climate crisis. For me, it was a connection to a place, my beaches, my home, and seeing it change in my short time of life, and how this had affected our community's food systems and our day-to-day lives. Overall, we did not seek any monetization or any money from this lawsuit, but just recognizing our rights to a life-sustaining climate here in Hawaii. And now, not to disregard a ton of information in terms of the litigation process, but something we say here in Hawaii is long story short. Our lawsuit has come to a historical settlement agreement, which means both parties in this case, the 13 young people and the Hawaii Department of Transportation and the state of Hawaii, have come to a mutual understanding and agree with each other. It also affirmed the right to a clean and healthful environment, achieving our goal. Our Governor Josh Green and Hawaii Department of Transportation agreed to take all actions necessary to achieve zero emissions no later than 2045 for ground, sea, and inter-island air transportation. It also helped establish a greenhouse gas reduction plan within 1 year. It also looks at reforming Hawaii Departments of Transportation's budget and programming, creating positions to oversee implementation and create benchmarks. It also provides youth with a seat at the table through a forming of a youth council that will advise the Hawaii Department of Transportation and overall the state of Hawaii with appropriate and authentic solutions in terms of achieving zero emissions at an equitable level at our communities. The process to get here was very long. We went over many years. I think now that it's 3 years that this case has been in process. And just this past June, we celebrated the settlement with all of us here in Hawaii. And I know that the communities here in Hawaii, whether they're in climate change or just people who are passionate about protecting our environment, we are all looking at this settlement as a success and really a win.
Got 1 minute left.
Thank you. So yes. Thank you so much, everyone. That concludes my presentation. I hope it was very insightful, and I'd like to thank these people here. Mahalo nui.
Thank you, Pahonu. That was really, really incredible and fantastic as well to hear that you guys have had such success. That was really, really insightful. And as well, I hope we can all think about what else we here in Bermuda could potentially do that's similar. So remember, guys, please have any questions for Pahonu you might have, and please put them in chat. And we'll get on to a question and answer session with Pahonu and with our second youth activist just after she presents. Thank you, Pahonu. We'll talk to you in a bit. So now please join me in welcoming our second youth activist presenting today, who will be Sarah Goody.
Hey everyone.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation. We've got about 8 minutes.
Okay, awesome. 1 second, everyone, while I go ahead and share my screen. Great. So hi everyone, my name is Sarah Goody. I am a 19-year-old climate justice activist and the founder of Climate Now, and I'm super excited to be here today to share with all of you my journey as a climate activist and becoming a youth leader of the climate movement. So to just start off another little kind of overview of what I've done as a climate activist and humanitarian. So my journey really started in 6th grade. So at 12 years old, I was in my 6th grade science class, and I had a teacher, Rebecca Newbern, and she began a unit all about climate change. And at the time, I was living in California, and we had wildfires that were kind of going on at the same time. And I remember this was the first time that I truly felt connected to the climate crisis. And it was the first realization I had that, wow, like this is what my future could look like. And realizing that climate change is not just an issue of the future, it's an issue of the present day that was impacting myself, impacting my family. And I knew that I had to do something to go out and to get involved and to make a difference. So with that, I got involved with an organization called YAY Camp, or Youth Empowered Action Camp. And it was a week-long summer camp that was all about introducing young people to activism. And at the time, I didn't really know what activism was, but it was kind of that first introduction that got me thinking, wow, even at 12 years old, even at 13 years old, maybe I can have an impact on other people, and I could use my voice to speak up and speak out in a really meaningful way. So I was really grateful to YAY Camp because that exposed me to a community of passionate peers and mentors, a few of which are on the screen. Specifically, Charles Organ was one of those mentors for me. He had started an organization called Greening Forward, which is focused on providing different educational grants and opportunities to young people kind of internationally who want to make a difference in their schools or their communities. So I got involved with Greening Forward and ended up working on their youth council, which was really exciting for me. At the time I want to say 13, and everyone else was in college. So I felt very, very cool, very crazy experience. And it was kind of my first introduction to this world of climate activism. So that led me into a movement called the Fridays for Future movement. And as I was working with Greening Forward, I was sent out to do and lead a conference in New York City. And that's where I met this girl named Alexandria Villasenor. And at the time, she was on her 18th week doing a climate strike outside of the United Nations in New York. So this means she wouldn't go to school on Fridays, and instead she'd go outside the United Nations. She'd sit there with the sign, and she'd start kind of talking with the community about this issue that was important to her. So I was there, I joined Alexandria, and I was so inspired by her work and by the impact that just sitting on a bench could have with the community. So I ended up doing a climate strike and then bringing that back to my own community of the San Francisco Bay Area, where I started a 60-week climate strike outside of San Francisco City Hall and the San Francisco Ferry Building. And this kind of was the first time that I really felt like, wow, even at 12, even at 13, I have the power to do something with my voice. And I started getting approached by press and by leaders. I actually ended up going to the National Democratic Convention as a part of the movement and started to receive a lot of different insight from other young people about how can we use our voice and how can we utilize protests to start making a difference. So I continued doing this kind of climate strike work. And I would remember I was talking to people back at my school. I was probably in 8th grade at around this time. And I started to realize that a lot of my friends were really excited by the work that I was doing, but they didn't really have a foundational understanding of what climate change was. So I knew I wanted to do something about this, and I ended up starting my own nonprofit organization called Climate Now, which focuses on educating young people about climate change and providing them with resources to go out into their communities and start getting involved. So through Climate Now, I was able to give different climate presentations to K through 12 schools around the world, kind of designing different curriculum for the younger students and the older students, and really just learned that through telling my own story and through starting to introduce climate change to other young people, that I could really inspire them to start taking the actions that I was doing and also to get involved in their own creative and exciting different ways. And then more recently, I also want to dive into kind of the intersections of climate change and the climate movement with a lot of different topics. So as I was doing this work with Climate Now, I started to have a lot of kind of mental health issues that I was struggling with. I think especially with climate change being such a kind of dire and big issue, it was really easy to feel sometimes a little bit hopeless or very sad and scared about what our future was looking like. So this kind of prompted me into getting involved in some mental health work. And I ended up working on Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation, their advisory board as a youth climate activist. So I came together with about, I want to say 30 other young people from around the world working on an array of different kind of social justice issues and started to provide my insight as a climate justice advocate into how the Born This Way Foundation could start to provide different resources to young people who were involved in environmental activism and in climate justice work in meaningful ways to inspire and promote kindness. So that's a photo there of me with Lady Gaga's mom, Cynthia, who runs the foundation with her, and then their executive director, Maya.
Sarah, we've got about 30 seconds left.
Okay, awesome. And then just outside of that, I've been really involved in a bunch of different kind of work within the climate movement. And I just really want to kind of echo that there's so many ways to get involved, that, climate activism isn't just one thing, that you can really utilize your passions to make a difference, to speak out, and to create a positive impact. And with that, just some of the things that I'm more involved with now. And if you're interested in learning more, you can check out, I have a website, you can connect with me, and just really want to echo that you have the power to change the world. You're not alone. And I'm excited to see the journeys that all of you embark on.
Wow, that was really incredible, Sarah. And thank you so much for sharing with us your journey.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And folks, remember, please type in any questions you might have for both Sarah and Pahonu in the chat so we can ask them here. We'd just like to ask both of you guys, Pahonu, we had that slide up earlier with the list of passions. Can you share with us a little bit more about why you wanted to know about that?
Yeah, kind of just sharing as well what Sarah was just saying, that our passions really can make an impact. And sometimes I think it's hard for people to see whether it be their love for animals, even football, that they can be vehicles and mediums for change within your community. It may not seem possible, but I think as long as you really think and become creative around addressing the climate crisis, because creativity is a very big aspect of it, you can find a way, an avenue to help out.
Wonderful. And can both of you tell us just a little bit more about what you find most rewarding about working on climate justice issues?
I know for me, I think the reward comes from seeing other young people, seeing my friends, seeing my family responding, and start to get excited about what a future could look like. That's really driven by this passion, by this empathy for others and our planet, and just seeing everyone come together and being excited and forming this community has been so rewarding to me.
That's really incredible. And what about you, Pahonu?
Yeah, I think I would agree. For me, kind of working in environmental work, even celebrating the small wins in terms of seeing fish populations return over time, see once endangered species really come back into our spaces is a very rewarding thing for me.
Wonderful. We've got a question in from Summersfield too. Pahonu, we want to know what your biggest challenge is being a youth activist.
Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, I think one of the largest challenges is, of course, mobilizing our generation, young people, to take the appropriate actions, but as well as educating whether it be our parents or older generations around climate change, that it does exist. For many older people, it's a new concept. But for young people, I think because we're experiencing it, in our day-to-day lives, it's easier for us to understand that it's something that is happening and we need to take action right now.
Absolutely. And can you guys tell us as well, what were your favorite things about the experiences that you've had in climate action thus far?
I can start. I think one of my favorite things was getting involved in these really big climate strikes, and starting to see just such a huge turnout and such a huge community. I think we had over 30,000 students protesting one day in San Francisco, and to just see that energy and that excitement was very, very inspiring. And just to also see communities coming together. Recently, I did a lot of work in Hawaii, with an animal sanctuary and getting to see that impact on the community, working with the animals, and then seeing how maybe the climate activism that I do in my everyday life can help those going forward was really inspiring and exciting.
Wonderful. And can you guys tell us just how you think it can inspire others to be more involved in climate action?
Yeah, I think it's very important to be the example. A lot of the times, people don't see the solutions plausible or easy to do until you actually do them yourselves. Being the example for your family and community members is a really good step into the world of activism and overall achieving and protecting our environment.
How do you guys stay motivated and hopeful in the face of the climate crisis then?
I mean, I think even looking at Pahanu and the work that is going on, seeing that people are making a difference, and getting to see other youth activists in action, that's what keeps me going all the time, staying connected with those individuals. So I just strongly recommend, reaching out. I think there's so many young people here, even within this community, and staying involved, staying in touch, seeing that other people really, truly do care, and want to do something about it. That's also just a great way and to start getting connected and taking action and seeing how you can come together and do that as a community.
Wonderful. And was there a specific event or a moment that made you realize how urgent climate was? Sarah, I know you talked about the wildfires earlier.
Yeah,
Pardon?
for me that was the wildfires in my community of the San Francisco Bay Area, in California. Wildfires have been truly kind of every year a big threat, and I personally have asthma, so every time that comes along, I've had to be going to the hospital, and to just see so many communities evacuating. One of my family friends is actually a firefighter, and he was on the ground working for I want to say like 2 weeks, with very little sleep. So seeing that direct impact was really scary and kind of the immediate urgent threat that I knew I had to do something.
And thank you so much, guys. I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time for question and answers now. But please keep your questions in mind, and keep in mind you'll also have a chance to ask Pahonu more questions on site at the UEI on Thursday too. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. And just before we pass over to the next installment, I'm going to pass to my co-host Leah to introduce our subject matter expert.
Thank you so much. So our subject matter expert for today is Dr. J. Marshall Shepard. Dr. J. Marshall Shepard is a leading international weather climate expert and is the Georgia Athletic Association Distinguished Professor of Geography and Atmospheric Sciences at the University of Georgia. Dr. Shepard was the 2013 president of American Meteorological Society, the nation's largest and oldest professional/science society in the atmospheric and related sciences. Dr. Shepard serves as the director of the University of Georgia's Atmospheric Sciences Program, the associate director of climate and outreach for the Institute for Resilient Infrastructure Systems, and full professor in the Department of Geography, where he was a previous associate department head. In 2023, he was appointed Associate Dean for Research, Scholarship, and Partnerships in the Franklin College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Georgia. His areas of research include urban climate, hydrometeorological extremes, weather climate risk, and innovative outreach strategies. In 2024, Dr. Shepard was honored with the American Association of Geographers Presidential Achievement Award, and in 2023 received the prestigious Environmental Law Institute Award. Welcome, Dr. Shepard.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me okay, Leah?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I want to thank you all for having me once again. I think this is my second time speaking at this amazing Youth Climate Summit. I speak in all types of formats on climate, but this is always one of my favorites because as someone who, as a professor at a university, I speak and interact with young people every day. I also have a couple of kids, one of which is still in high school, and I'm very well aware that as much as climate change is impacting us now, your generation forward will bear the brunt of this particular crisis. But I'm always optimistic when I talk to this group because I know that you all are the future. And as I often say, the youth shall lead us, but you shouldn't exclusively be burdened with that. I often see people my age say, well, the youth get it, they'll figure it out on their own. We should not burden you exclusively with that. That's not your burden to bear alone. And so it's important to understand. So I want to take a little time. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully we'll get that going here in a moment. And I'll have a couple of things I'd like to share with you. So I call this Climate Change 2.0, what's next? And the reason I decided to call this talk Climate Change 2.0 is I want to make sure, okay, great. I saw a message pop in. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. I wanted to sort of move beyond this idea of, okay, this is what's happening and it's bad and we're doomed. I want to take this in a step-by-step process so that you all can understand where you can play a role. I know I saw one of the polls that was given to you all earlier, and the majority of you fell into this category that you have some belief that there are things that you can do, but there wasn't the strongest sense of that. There were a couple of you that were just in utter despair and don't believe that you can do anything about it. So I want to focus in the middle there because there are things that I believe we all can do. I pulled this up just from nostalgia. This was from last year when I spoke to this group. These were some of the questions that were flying around or some of the things that we were discussing or that you were discussing as attendees of this particular conference. Why does climate change matter? What can I do about climate change? What were the challenges of successes last year? We must act. These are very relevant and salient points today, but I just want to build on them a little bit today. So this is really interesting because a person born in 2020, now that's someone that would be 4 years old today, will experience more climate hazards in their lifetime than someone born in a year closer to when I was born. Now, I'm not that old. I wasn't born in 1965, but someone that was born in the late 60s or early 70s, someone around your generation and even younger will experience significantly more extreme weather and climate events, crop failure, river floods, and so forth. Now, I don't know if you all paid attention to the news in recent weeks, but there is a European organization highly regarded called Copernicus, and they issued data saying it's almost certain, it's quite likely, in fact, that 2024 will be the warmest year on record. We beat 2023, which was also the warmest year on record. So 2024 is likely to pass that. But what was particularly of concern is that that data set shows that for the first time since pre-industrial sort of times, we have likely exceeded warming of 1.5 degree, which is essentially 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. I know you all still speak in Celsius, I think in Bermuda. Here in the US, we speak in Fahrenheit. So I try to say both. So 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit is about 1.5 degree C. That's concerning, y'all, because the Paris Agreement was trying to limit warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. We're already there and likely going to shoot just past it in the coming years. And so these are just some of the sort of how many times more events we expect at different levels of warming. So you can see if we don't get a handle on that warming, how that relates to increases in heat waves, drought, tropical cyclones, which I know is something that is of particular concern to you there in Bermuda. So let's actually do a little science. I am a scientist, I'm a professor. I know many of you know this, but it's often sort of good to reflect on the fact of how climate is changing and why it's changing. We live comfortably on planet Earth because of the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is not a bad thing. In fact, we survived last night, and you survived last night, and I survived last night because of the greenhouse effect. Because of that effect, we can live comfortably on a planet that's not too cold. Many planets would be too cold at night to survive. But this interaction that we have between greenhouse gases in our atmosphere that serve to re-radiate and keep our planet warm, that's a good thing. The problem is, as we learn to burn fossil fuels and to degrade and remove land cover, we have gotten out of balance, and so our atmosphere is warming more so at the surface where we all live, and so that is why climate warming is leading to changes in our weather patterns, sea level rise, changes in our crop growth, and various things that we all depend on for life. I won't get into the details of this because this is sort of the worst case scenarios, but we are concerned that some of these things are starting to happen. We know that our weather's changing. We know that sea level's rising. We know that our infrastructure is now more vulnerable to climate. But these are some even longer term, bigger picture things that we as climate scientists keep an eye on. The so-called tipping points. What's a tipping point? Well, take a rubber band. Imagine you have a rubber band and you stretch it. You can stretch that rubber band, and at some point it reaches its point of elasticity and it won't really snap back. It just kind of sits there. And in our climate system, there are these tipping points like that too. So, for example, if the Greenland ice sheet melted, or if we got significant thawing of permafrost, or if the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which is large circulation in the Atlantic Ocean, if that starts to slow down, which there is recent evidence that it may be, by the way, that will cause catastrophic or major changes in our climate system. Now, the good news is I don't think we're approaching some of these tipping points, but the bad news is there are signs that some are starting to happen in isolation. So it's important to understand there are local impacts on Bermuda, but then there are these broader impacts around the planet that then could come back and affect Bermuda. So we have these sort of scale dependent processes. So at this point, I want to pause and talk to you about climate change and extreme events. So here's a checkpoint. So I believe the conference organizers are going to put up another poll that essentially asks you the question here that I had on the screen. So I want to get your thoughts. How do you feel? How would you answer the question or make the point? The effects of climate change are present today in today's weather. Yes or no, true or false? Think about it. I'll give you a few more seconds here before I move on. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of yeses, a couple of no's. Here comes some more little fingerprints coming in because I can see them as you can on the screen. A significant number of yeses. I think that I have enough yeses to sort of move on. I see more coming in. I think it's almost unanimous that you all agree that, okay, I'm going to grab the screen back. Let's see. Let's see. I'm going to put it back in slideshow mode. So this is exactly, let me move that. This is exactly when I testified before the US Congress back in 2019. I actually told them absolutely climate change impacts are in today's weather, and the extremes are becoming more extreme, and people feel them more. So the averages are changing, the medians are changing, but what people notice and feel more are the extremes. So let's kind of talk about that for a moment. Most of you may realize or remember this, but a few weeks ago, the United States experienced a devastating hurricane, Hurricane Helene. Now, one of the things that concerns me about hurricanes, and I want to focus on hurricanes here because you're an island nation. You sit right out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, so you have to deal with hurricanes. One of the things that we know from scientific literature is that hurricanes, on average, are becoming stronger. They're not going to, I want to kind of make sure you understand this because I hear people say this often incorrectly. Climate change is expected to lead to more intense tropical cyclones on average, but not necessarily more of them. But when they occur, they'll be more intense. The other thing that we are seeing with hurricanes and tropical cyclones, even tropical storms, they're rapidly intensifying. So take Helene, storm that was quite significant, but as it was moving into the Gulf of Mexico, the waters were so warm. There was something called a marine heat wave happening. Waters were extremely warm. So this hurricane had plenty of fuel supply. So boom, you go to bed to a Cat 1 or Cat 2 hurricane or even a tropical storm, you wake up to a major hurricane. That's the reality of many of the hurricanes that we're dealing with today. The other reality is that these storms are wetter. They are producing more rainfall. So when Hurricane Helene made landfall, it produced a lot of rainfall near landfall, but look at all of the rain. The heaviest rains are the ones in dark blue. Way up here in the mountains of North Carolina and even into Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee and even into Georgia, significant rainfall. So we know from basic physics, I mean, I took physics in college, and maybe some of you have had it in high school or in college. When the atmosphere is warmer, it has more water vapor available to it. And so that water vapor can feed the rainfall in big storms like Hurricane Helene. Maybe a week or so later, Hurricane Milton came along. And one of the things you see here is just how warm the waters of the Gulf of Mexico were as Hurricane Milton rapidly became a Category 5 hurricane and one of the more destructive hurricanes that we've seen. The reds here and oranges show the likely contribution of climate change to that ocean temperature. So we are sophisticated enough now in climate science. There's a part of our field called climate science attribution or extreme weather attribution. We now know how to do studies that indicate the relative contribution of climate change to today's heat waves, drought, floods, hurricanes, and so forth. So with that, let's talk more about the so what. I mean, I think we all know that. That was just sort of contextual or stage setting. We know that climate change risk, societal vulnerability, and the governance processes to solve this challenge is a complex intersection. Now, I don't know how many of you drive a car, but how many of you would like to navigate this particular intersection? I wouldn't. That's how I feel sometimes when I stare down what we're facing with climate change, but I remain hopeful because I think we are able to address this. We know what needs to be done and we have the technology. But I want to talk about risk. When we think about risk, whether you're on the island of Bermuda or sitting here in Georgia, where I am in the US, we have different and varying risks associated with weather and climate. So for example, we know that risk is a function of or dependent on the type of hazard that's occurring. That could be a hurricane, that could be a flood, that could be a heat wave. Who's exposed or what infrastructure, even if it's not people, both are exposed. Who has greater vulnerability and who is able to bounce back once they're exposed to the hazard. So in other words, if a hurricane hit Bermuda today, it's not. Are there parts of your community that are more vulnerable? Are there parts of your community that would take a longer time to recover, or socioeconomically communities? I don't know. In this country, you can see that we do have some vulnerabilities. The United States, this dark blue indicates the parts of the US that have the greatest risk or vulnerability to climate change. And you can see I'm here in Georgia. So you can see much of the southern part of the US is particularly vulnerable to floods, climate, but also not just because of those events happening there, but because there are people there that have uh, lower socioeconomic means or less capacity to bounce back. That's what we call resilience. And so here in the US, but this is around the world. It's the case in Bermuda. It's the case in Nigeria. It's the case in Estonia, wherever. Typically, poor communities, low income communities, communities of color, elderly, and younger children will exhibit the greatest risk or vulnerability from events that will happen because of extreme weather and climate change. This is a picture in New Orleans, Louisiana, after a major hurricane, Hurricane Katrina, several years ago. Most of the people that needed to go to this football stadium for medicine and food and shelter were people that were on the lower spectrum of the socioeconomic status. And that's the case almost anywhere. So let's talk now. We're going to bring this to more positive discussion because I am a glass half full person. There are things that we can do. We know that we can reduce carbon emissions, and there are various ways that we can do that through mitigation, things like changing our energy mix, things like thinking about how the types of food that we eat, the types of things that we do in terms of maybe composting our food. There are many things that we can do to help reduce carbon emissions. That's called mitigation. We also can adapt, and I'll show you an example in Bermuda there of adaptation because the need for resiliency is very important. So this is back in Georgia. This is the state of Georgia where I live. There was a hurricane a couple of years ago, Michael, that came into the state. Now, most of our agricultural activity for the state of Georgia is here. So peanuts, I don't know how many of you like peanut butter, but most of the world's peanuts are grown here, or a large percentage are grown right in that part of Georgia. A lot of the cotton is grown in that part of Georgia. If you have a t-shirt on made from cotton, if you like peanut butter, a lot of the pecans are grown here. So when those things are disrupted by a weather event, no matter where you live in the world, even in Bermuda, if you bought some peanut butter or a cotton t-shirt, you may have been paying more because of all of the sort of lost crops because of that hurricane. You can see pecan trees down here. So one of the things that a colleague of mine, Ian Giamonico, has said is that, resilience can show a 10-to-1 return on losses. We have to become a society, whether you're in Bermuda or Athens, Georgia, that's proactive, not reactive to these storms. So there are things that we can do ahead of time to prevent disaster and reduce losses. Let's take a look at that. So here's a map from the National Climate Assessment showing sea level rise. This is an average change in sea level rise in the Pacific and Atlantic. And again, you know where you sit out here. One of the things that is impacting Bermuda is sea level rise. Well,
Dr. Shepherd, I would just like to let you know you have 1 minute before we move to
I'm
Q&A.
finishing up right now. So the Bermudan, I found this article in the Bermudan, and it was talking about the fact that the new airport terminal is being constructed 13 feet or 3.96 meters above sea level. This is 4 feet or 1.2 meters higher than the existing terminal building. That's an adaptation strategy to build in resilience. And this is really kind of confirming that in Bermuda, you all are on the right track. This is a recent paper published in the International Journal of Disaster Risk Reduction that found that there's a relatively high level of preparedness to the new normals of climate in Bermuda, and people acknowledge generally the magnitude of the threat. So I don't really need to show this next slide, but climate governance is important. Laws, litigation, budgeting, norms, and so forth. All of these things will be required to move us forward, and it's a mixed bag of solutions. It's not one solution. So I'm going to stop there, and maybe, I don't know if we have time for a question or two.
Yes, we totally do. Thank you so much for your presentation. For our first question, I will ask, because you are a scientist, what do scientists think that we should do about climate change?
Yeah, I think the question, some scientists will say, well, you got to reduce your carbon footprint, or you got to start tracking how your own emissions and thinking about ways to adapt. I agree with that, but I think the most important thing that you as youth can do is become climate and environmental and sustainable voters and voices. Because all of those things like changing the light bulbs of the types of cars we drive will be important. Changing our diet somewhat, perhaps eating less beef or more carbon or things that come from carbon intensive agriculture. But at the end of the day, the things that are going to really move the needle are large scale international and national policy changes. And that happens through voting. Who you vote for, and I don't care what party or what side you vote for, just make sure you hold our decision makers accountable for acting on climate.
Thank you so much. From the chat, why do you think we started burning fossil fuels even though our ancestors managed fine without electricity and power?
Well, it's about efficiency. I mean, look, we all have benefited from fossil fuels in some way. When we discovered in the Industrial Revolution back around 1850 or so that coal and oil and gas could dramatically and rapidly, uh, quote unquote, increase economic productivity. It literally is just a matter of economic opportunity. Now, I argue that we are in the midst of a potential new industrial revolution with a green economy and with renewable energies. Part of the pushback that you often hear if from maybe some that are a little more denialist or skeptical on climate, a lot of that is rooted in fear of change, fear of a new economic system. But there is so much opportunity in wind driven, solar driven, tidal driven, hydropower. I think that will burgeon a new industrial revolution for us, and your generation will reap the benefits in the same way that older generations did benefit in some ways from the first industrial revolution, although it came with some significant problems like pollution, and now we're seeing climate change as well.
What role do you think that local communities can play in combating climate change, and what are some successful examples that you have
Yeah,
personally seen?
that's a great example. I mean, if you live in a city, I mean, there's something called the urban heat island. I mean, the paved surfaces and buildings can produce more heat than surrounding vegetated land or rural landscapes. So local communities can immediately cool themselves down by just implementing more trees or changing black paved tops to white paved tops that are more reflective of the sun's energy. Local communities can put in measures that will, like, permeable roadways and so forth, so that when it's raining heavily, instead of the water just sitting on the paved surfaces, that filtrates into the paved surface, and that helps reduce flooding. We can go back and do things like put seawalls in, or in places that are experiencing more heat than they normally did, pass ordinances that require new builders and communities to make sure that there's adequate air conditioning or cooling stations in those communities. So local communities can have a significant and a more immediate impact than some of these international policies.
Thank you. And one last question, is it ethical to rely on geoengineering or other controversial technologies to mitigate climate change, or should we focus only on natural and sustainable solutions?
Well, I think that I'm here at the University of Georgia. We're very keen on looking at nature-based solutions, engineering with nature, but also other technologies that are not nature-based. I think geoengineering, this idea of launching large space mirrors or simulating volcanic eruptions, I think we need to keep those on the table, but I don't think we're there yet that we need them, because there's a song by a group I like called the Pet Shop Boys. Is a singing group, and they have a song called "Sometimes the Solution is Worse than the Problem." So I think we still need to study geoengineering, what's called climate intervention strategies, keep them on the table, but I don't think we're ready. Let's really focus on mitigation and adaptation right now, and just being more responsible with what we have.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Your presentation was very, very informative. I appreciate
Yes,
you, Dr. Shepard.
at Dr. Shepard 2013 on Twitter if you want to follow, or X. Bye.
Bye. All right, so we are going to move right into our next Menti poll. Just open the tab that you've already clicked on. And this Menti poll will just be a nice little open-ended response. What is something new that you have just learned from Dr. Shepard's presentation? Wow, I'm seeing a lot of great responses here. Oh, he's good at teaching. The greenhouse effect isn't always bad, but helps us live. Yes. Someone learned about how climate change matters and how a person born in 2020 experiences more climate hazards than someone born a lot before that. Oh yes, our generation will likely hold the brunt of the environmental damage, 2024 being the hottest year on record. Sometimes the solution is worse than the problem. Seeing a lot of people saying that they learned about the effects of climate change. It's amazing. I love that. How the greenhouse gas effect isn't always bad and helps keep us alive. Seeing a lot of that. These are all really great responses. Yeah, how 2024 was the hottest recorded year right after 2023 was. And how we have to make differences now for the future. Very impactful. Wow, these are all really great responses. I'm seeing a lot of the greenhouse gas effect, how it isn't always bad. A lot about climate change being crazier this year and how 2024 became the hottest year on record right after 2023 was proclaimed to be. Wow, thank you so much. These are all really, really great responses. But now I will pass back to my co-host, William, for our NGO videos.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Leah. And again, thank you to Dr. Shepard, too, for such an informative presentation. And great to see how much engagement we're getting with that, too. I think everyone's learning a lot and that there's a lot more still that all of us have to do. But some of those solutions that Dr. Shepard highlighted can be brought about by local communities and by groups of communities, too. And so we're going to hear from a few NGOs who are operating here locally in Bermuda. And just to give you an idea, an NGO is a non-governmental organization. So anyone can be an NGO, really. A group of you guys can form together and form an NGO yourselves. We're going to hear from some local Bermudian NGOs that are doing work to address climate change. And these will be BOP, Green Rock, BIOS, and the Bermuda Zoological Society. So we're going to see some of their videos just now.
My name is Cheryl Knapp, and I am the Blue Economy Specialist with the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program, the community-driven program to foster the sustainable, profitable, and enjoyable use of our ocean resources. And this is done through the Bermuda Prosperity Plan, which is a two-part program consisting of the Marine Spatial Plan, designed to protect 20% of Bermuda's oceans, remove the pressures from the ecosystem, help to ensure that they can keep delivering ecosystem benefits and remain resilient in climate change. BUPS hosted a series of learnings with scientists who helped to explain the importance of keeping Bermuda's ocean healthy and providing information about the amazing resources that we have right in our backyard. We've also partnered previously with the Youth Climate Summit, and we're really proud to have been part of the YCS student-led social media campaign. Bermuda is a small island nation, but we can have a big impact nonetheless on the solution. Bermuda's waters are much larger than its actual landmass, and if we become good stewards and responsible stewards for the environment, we can all keep enjoying our environment and our ecosystems and the benefits that our waters bring to us for many, many years to come.
My name is Eugene Dean, and I'm the chairman of the board for Green Rock. One of our major initiatives is Earth Hour. And the goal with Earth Hour is to raise awareness of all the loss of nature around the world and encouraging people to care more for nature and the environment and live more sustainable lives. Our goal is to get more people in the environment, working with the environment, because we find that the closer people are to nature, then the more they naturally care and respect for it. At Green Rock, we've always been involved with young people, and I guess one of our standout examples is when we formed Eco Schools, which is a program that's actually now run by BUEI, and that's a program where it incorporates environmental action into the school curriculum and is inspiring young people to be advocates for the environment. And it really takes us just being more in touch and in tune with nature, and because we're part of nature, then that includes being in touch and in tune with ourselves. And the more connected we all are, then the easier we find it for us to come up with sustainable solutions to address all the challenges we see. I encourage you to spend more time in the environment and be close with the environment, and be assured that this beautiful environment that we've been blessed with will be there for you and your children to enjoy as well.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Noyes.
And I'm Claire Fox.
And we're joining you today from ASU Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences.
At ASU BIOS, our mission is to share fundamental knowledge of our oceans through state-of-the-art scientific research and comprehensive educational experiences. ASU BIOS is a global leader in understanding our ocean and how to create a healthy planet that's habitable for all. Research here at ASU BIOS has demonstrated critical shifts in our environment, from changing ocean temperatures to deoxygenation to our oceans becoming more acidic. Long-term time series give you the power to be able to distinguish natural variability from man-induced change.
Connected directly with our research are our education programs. Our Climate Classroom, one of our local flagship youth initiatives, immerses students in climate research through collaborative virtual reality and hands-on experiences. We guide students in exploring local climate scenarios, fostering a deeper understanding of how data is collected and how our changing climate affects ocean chemistry, biodiversity, and ecosystem health. Through scientific research and immersive education, we hope to inspire every young person to play a part in ensuring a balanced ecosystem for a planet habitable for all.
I'm Dr. Stephanie Toro, and I work with the Bermuda Zoological Society. So we work actively to try to fight climate change through two efforts: education and conservation. On the conservation front, we have our microforest project, which one of the aims of this, in addition to biodiversity, is sequestering carbon and helping reduce that carbon footprint that we have here in Bermuda. On the flip side, we have our education, and we work actively to try and get that messaging out there through our schools programming. So we have some classes that focus specifically on climate change. One of my favorite ones is our mangroves, Bermuda's Climate Change Heroes. And in this one, we take students into mangroves, whether it's on Chunk Island, Walsingham Park, or our Hungry Bay Mangrove Restoration Project we have going on. And students actually do measurements looking at how mangroves do a better job of pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and how they sequester it into their tissues. One of the things that we really hope to instill in all our student programming is the idea that one person can make a difference. So whether it's our Kids on the Reef program, where they look at climate change and other ocean issues, we want them to focus on how can they, at their age level, have an impact. And it's one of those things, realizing there are so many options, so many things you can do as one person, even as an M2 or even in the primary levels. There's so much that can be done.
Thank you all, and I hope you guys enjoyed those videos, and we'll be prepared to engage with those NGOs too, because they will be actually on site at BUEI on Thursday when you attend for the in-person session. We're going to ask you now to turn to a next Menti poll and to answer two questions. Which climate-related projects among those are new to you? And we'll ask you as well, which climate-related projects would you like to know more about? And we're going to ask you to keep your answers to that second one in mind, because you can talk to those NGOs yourselves on Thursday at the BUEI. We're seeing a lot of people are pretty new to Green Rock and to the Mangroves Project too. But most of you guys seem to agree that all of these are pretty new. We've got some variability there, but most of you guys seem to have heard of BIOS before and the Bermuda Zoological Society. We see that BOP and Green Rock seem to be the newest ones to you guys. Have you guys not heard of Earth Hour before? Although, as well, BOP is a new addition and has only been developed in the last few years, so that could be potentially why you haven't heard of it yet. Do keep these ones in mind, because you'll get to talk to them as well and to learn more about them on Thursday and potentially get involved with their work if you'd like. Interesting to see that you guys have all seemed to have, or most of you seem to have heard of BIOS and BZS though. And we're wondering too if there's any projects that those guys brought up that you might want yourselves to get involved with, or based upon the presentations you've heard from Dr. Shepard and the youth activists too, whether there's any other projects too that you think that those particular NGOs should get involved with. So looking ahead in our schedule, guys, we're coming towards the end of our first day, but we want to set out some schedules for your awareness. As you progress further through the Youth Climate Summit, we're going to ask you to discuss some tracks around those three themes that we talked about earlier, around conservation, which is the act of safekeeping existing resources for present and future generations. For example, again, protecting water quality and the railway trail and natural environment and spaces. We're going to ask you to think about sustainability, and that being the regenerative use of resources so that you can meet your needs today without compromising the ability of future generations or our children from meeting theirs. So this too would involve perhaps local food growing systems and climate justice too, which is giving a voice to those who are most vulnerable to the negative impacts of climate change and ensuring that all have a say in climate action. So as Dr. Shepard talked about earlier, those who are most negatively impacted by the effects of climate change and perhaps have the least ability to be resilient and to respond to them. So again, the principle that you mess it up and you should fix it. We're also going to ask if you are a YCS alumni thus far and you have participated in the Youth Climate Summit before, that you will please indicate your registry for this, and that you will please select that track when you go ahead to your track selection. We will be selecting tracks on Wednesday, and we look forward to engaging you to work your projects among those two. So we're going to turn over very soon to one of our other YCS alumni who we're very happy to have today, and that is Akina Williams, who is going to join us and talk to us a little bit about the project that she's been working on throughout the last year.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Akina Williams. I am 17 years old, and I am currently in my final year in BHS. I have been with the Youth Climate Summit program since the beginning, which was in 2021. So that's about 4 years now.
That's fantastic. And we're also going to cue the video that we believe we have from your latest project, Akina. So in the background. I wanted to ask Akina, we've just covered our tracks and we're getting ready to think about our track selection and developing our own projects. What was your track and why did you choose it?
So this year I have been on the climate justice track. Before I was on sustainability, but now I wanted to try something new and actually take the opportunity to recognize and tackle gaps in our advocacy in new ways to actually target younger people in Bermuda.
That's very interesting. Why did you choose, or what was the project that you chose then to reach out with? And what was your role in it?
So this year, climate justice focused on the social media campaign. It was a collaborative effort. So I came up with the idea using the influence of other YCS members' ideas and their inputs, and yeah.
Wow, this is very interesting, and we're seeing a lot about the social media campaign in this video just here. It looks very, very diverse, and you guys seem to have covered a lot of ground on it. Can you talk us a little bit, or talk to us a little bit more about the track that it focused on? What was the impact of this?
Oh, okay. So this project was not only for the climate justice, but also for the entire Youth Climate Summit in whole. So it was created to help advocate our goals to the youth of Bermuda to help encourage them to actually take action for not only their country, but themselves and their families. So the first part of this project officially started in August this year and lasted for 9 weeks. So the first 3 weeks was dedicated to the conservation track, the next sustainability, and the final 3 was dedicated to my track, climate justice. During these weeks, each track had information posted on the YCS Bermuda YCS BDA Instagram, which you guys should follow, and videos introducing new tips, facts, and our local influencers, which were Mr. Photogenic, Power Girl, and Sargasso Girl. So we hope to continue this social media campaign throughout the year with our newer members. So we also learned about the BOP Marine Spatial Plan, and also had the opportunity to meet with members of BOP to further understand their goals while introducing them to ours. So yeah, we had a lot of fun with this project. So
Sounds like a lot of fun, and you guys certainly seem to have touched on a lot of topics too. It's very interesting that you got local influencers as well to work with you on this. What was it like working with the likes of Mr. Photogenic and Power Girl Trina and Sargasso Girl too?
So I found it personally, I found it really fun, especially when we got to like see and learn about the roads and preserve in Bermuda's environment. Specifically for the social media project, I found it interesting to interact with people who have been like role models to me for like a really long time. For example, Sargasso Girl, because she's actually a member of BOP. And yeah, when we had one-to-one interactions, it's really fun and interesting, lovely.
That's fantastic. What was it? What was it in particular about Sargasso Girl, if I can ask, that was so inspirational to you?
So when I go to university, I went to focus on oceanography. So she sort of focuses on like the actual sea and stuff, especially on her like Instagram, which I've been following ever since was first introduced to her in 2021. So it really helps inspire me with what I want to be when I grow up. Well, I am growing when I move on in my education.
That's really incredible, and it sounds like you've done a lot with this campaign. But was there anything in particular that you liked absolutely the most, or that you would want to continue doing in this campaign?
So what I liked about this project and the previous ones was actually collaborating with other people. I think it actually has helped me to become more confident in my abilities to present and just exist as a person, while also like opening my eyes to many other new perspectives throughout the many like field trips we've actually had over the years. Before, I would not be able to present to like a large audience or just an audience in general, but now I'm doing it right now. So I think that's really cool and shocking and a really good improvement. I, like I said, I really hope you guys actually take interest in the Youth Climate Summit program and join us for the year-long project program. But also, I hope you enjoy this summit if you don't really like have the time to join us for the year-long program. So thank you for having me. Thanks.
Yeah, this is really great. I mean, uh, you guys certainly must have learned a lot throughout this presentation. Is there anything that you've done differently since, or anything that's changed in your life since getting involved with this?
So my life has become more adventurous, if I like say so myself. It's more, I'm more open to actually doing activities and doing things that I wouldn't have done when I was younger, because I would be like weighing the pros and cons. But now I just like immediately just dive in without like considering, well, I should consider, but like without considering um the like negative things. I just go on the positive things. Usually I have like anxiety and stuff, but now forget about anxiety. It used to weigh me down. So
That's really incredible, and yeah, and that sounds an awful lot again like what we heard earlier from the youth activist Sarah Goody about the empowerment that even working together on climate projects like this can be.
yeah. So the social media campaign has actually been really successful. It's has reached over 20,000 people, and that was our goal. So I'm really happy. It was a big impact on like not only the campaign but also our advocacy. So yeah, it's good to see that we've actually reached a lot of people.
That's fantastic. And are there any other messages or any other things that you really, really want the other folks in the Youth Climate Summit now to hear and to get involved with?
If I were you guys at your age, I would just take the opportunity when I see an opportunity. So why not just try it out and like actually get involved? So yeah.
That's really fantastic. And yeah, absolutely. It certainly seems like all of you guys who worked on the project too have come out of it with a lot of great experience and with a lot of growth too. And that sounds an awful lot like the experience had by Pohonu as well. And I'm really, really glad too that you guys were able to build so much and reach 20,000 people in just this single project. I mean, that's incredible.
Thank you.
You guys have done so well. And again, I hope you'll continue the project as well, and that other YCS participants can perhaps get involved with you and continue the work.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much, Akina. It was really great for you to join us today. Okay, folks, so I think we're coming towards the end of our program for today. So we're going to ask you to come on for one more Menti poll as well. So please go back to your Menti tab, and we're going to recap the day, and we're going to review a little bit about things that we learned today that make us care perhaps a little bit more about climate issues. Yes, our Earth does need our help. That's absolutely true. And I'm glad that that was first takeaway up there too. Yep. Impacts the food that we eat. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, where would we be if we had pervasive crop failures that undermined our ability to make food? Bermuda is being impacted by sea level rise, and you're right. Yeah, hurricanes, yep, getting more stronger and dangerous. And as the subject matter expert said as well, they're also holding more water. And we've seen a lot of water and a lot of rainfall recently in Bermuda. And I'm not that much older than you guys either, as much as it might not seem that way. But I remember a lot lighter rainfall when I was your age. The climate does help keep the world safe. That's absolutely right. And the greenhouse effect does keep the planet warm enough for us to survive. But as well, we know that the greenhouse effect, when there's too much of it and there's too much greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, that's what drives climate change. And that's what's currently responsible for all of these impacts we're facing. Yeah, heat waves are happening. Yes, but even though we are young, we can make a difference. That's absolutely true. I mean, Akina reached 20,000 people with just that single campaign. And we are close to exceeding the hottest year on record, which was last year. Yep, that's true. And that's something too that we're going to have to seriously reckon with, and also come up with some really, really, really powerful projects to deal with. Yeah, we will be in the thick of it if we don't start helping. But again, as everyone has said, everyone who's working together on these, from Dr. Marshall Shepard to Pohonu to Sarah to Akina, when we're working together and we're engaging ourselves in collaborative projects, we're getting a lot better at dealing with it. Yeah, pollution. Yep, that's a very serious one. I mean, Sarah talked about the wildfire impact on her asthma and being affected by that in the health point. Activism can bring you out of your shell. You're absolutely right. Someone said that we're cooked, but I don't think we are yet. And we still have time. And we still have a lot of time to come together, and we have a lot of time to build some really powerful projects. And again, to take advantage of all of the opportunities we have to build a better future. Yeah, the Earth does need our help. I think that really is a huge, huge, huge takeaway here. But there's also hundreds of you in this call just now, and all of you coming together as well can do an awful lot. Remember what Dr. Shepard said too, that there's a lot that we can do for our communities, and there's a lot more as well that we can do in collaboration with our government, or if you don't want to work with governments either, through non-governmental organizations. And we do have to change. That's right. Because the climate is changing and there's a lot changing around us too. But if we come together and we get involved in making a difference, perhaps we can make it a change for the better. Life on Earth is getting more challenging. But again, when we're faced with these challenges, it's best that we know that we're not facing them alone. So thank you so much, everybody, for those wonderful responses to this question, and we're glad you guys have learned so much through this first day. It's only our first day of the Youth Climate Summit this year, and we're still going to do a lot more learning. We're still going to do a lot more talking about what we can do about this. That's right. And although we do have some serious challenges ahead of us, we really hope that you have been inspired and enthused and engaged by all of these aspects of climate change we've learned about, and perhaps feel a little bit more aware about what we can do about them. We want to remind you of the answers to those Menti polls earlier, where a lot of people weren't really sure about what they could do about climate change, or perhaps didn't really feel they knew all that much about them. But we want to break out of that a little bit and to talk very honestly and clearly about what solutions are available to us, how we can reduce the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, what else we can do to prepare ourselves to deal with stronger hurricanes, and how we can come together as a community to build solutions for each other. We hope you guys will continue thinking about all of these things, and you'll continue thinking about what projects you guys can all get engaged with so that you can make a positive impact on the earth and for each other as well. So once again, we're going to remind you to think about your track selections as well. We all want to get ready to do some presentations and some projects on conservation, sustainability, and climate justice. But before we get into the track selection too, we've got a lot more learning to do. So I'm going to pass over to my co-host Leah to close out, and I want to thank you all for joining us this year.
As my co-host William just said, thank you so much, everyone, for attending day one of the Youth Climate Summit. And again, a special thank you to our partners who have made this able to happen. Thank you to our youth activists, Pahonu Coleman and Sarah Goody, and our subject matter expert, Dr. Shepard. And we look so forward to seeing you all tomorrow.